Excellent. That's a new feature of Zoom, according to James Hahn. Great. Catherine is here. Good. Well, then, it being 6 o'clock, I here formally call to order the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for June 2nd, 2021. Sherry, could we have a roll call?
Yes. Chair Quilisi?
Here.
Vice Chair Nolan?
Here.
Commissioner Lottis?
Here.
Commissioner Trent?
Not yet.
And Commissioner Swift?
Here.
Thank you.
Excellent. For the Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Swift, would you lead us, please?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
United States of
America.
and to the republic
Public.
for which it
which
stands,
stands,
one nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty, and justice
for
for all.
all.
Thank you. That little tone, was that someone joining us? John Trent, excellent. John joined us at 6:01, excellent. Is public communications, and I'm wondering, Sherry or Lucas, did we have any public communications for items not on the agenda? No one, okay. Then we will move on to the consent item, the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for May 19th this year. Do any commissioners have any refinements to the minutes as presented? If not, then how about a motion for approval?
All right, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the Ojai Planning Commission meetings from May 19th, 2021.
Excellent. A second? For discussion, I'll second it. And is there any discussion of the motion? If not, Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Quilisi?
Yes?
Nolan?
Yes.
Lottis?
Yes.
Trent?
Yes.
Swift?
Yes.
Thank you.
Terrific. Disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. I will start this time since I'm out of town. I am familiar with the property in item 2 and have seen most of the properties in item 3, but had no ex parte contacts. Commissioner Nolan, Vice Chair.
I'm familiar with the sites in agenda items 2 and 3, and I've had no ex parte contacts.
Terrific. Commissioner Lottis?
Yes, I am. I did drive up to the property today, and I took a look, and I have had no ex parte contacts.
Terrific. Commissioner Trent?
I did not have a chance to view the property in discussion 2, no ex parte contacts, and I'm familiar with the properties in discussion 3.
You can drive up North Signal and you don't see much of the property at 1124 anyway. Commissioner Swift?
Yes, I'm familiar with both sites on 2 and 3, no ex parte contact.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Then we go on to our public hearing item, a design review permit on 1124 North Signal. Lucas, would you take us through that, please?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'm going to have Mara Macaluso take you through that agenda report, but I wanted to also introduce Mara. She is our new part-time associate planner here with the city of Ojai. She comes to us with quite a bit of experience. I just wanted to run through that real quick. She was in Fillmore for about 3 years, operating at the senior planner level. And previous to that, she was with the city of Ventura for right around 18 years, working with both the Public Works Department and the planning team in both current planning and advanced planning. So she is certainly a welcomed addition and brings a lot of experience and exposure to the planning field and certainly to this department. So certainly welcome her, and she is going to be leading you through the item 2 for this evening. So Mara, with that, if you want.
Yes, and welcome to Ojai, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future as well as tonight, Maura.
Thank you, Commissioner Quillisi, and it's nice to meet all of you. And it's a privilege to be here tonight. So I'm going to present to you this project that's at 1124 North Signal, as you know, as you're aware. The project includes a remodel as well as additions. It's a 2-story structure, and because it's a 2-story structure, if there are any additions or remodels, the Planning Commission has the purview of reviewing those, and it's a discretionary permit. Anything that happens to the first story, the single story, though, is not for you to, it's not a discretionary permit. However, you're free to review it, of course. The project is in an R01 zone, and therefore it's 1 unit or per acre. The parcel, however, is 0.99 acres, but because it's a legal parcel, it's developable. And like I said, it already has a single family residence on it. The second story additions includes I'm sorry, I told Lucas it was his fault that I was nervous tonight. It has a 124 square foot addition to the existing kitchen, which is on the second story. And then also on the second story, there will be a 310 square foot deck that's off their master bedroom. The parcel is on a slope. So the master bedroom, when you're looking from the other side of the house, the back side, looks like a single story residence. It's only when you're looking from the front that you see a 2-story. Part of the project that's not for your discretionary review tonight is a remodel of the existing garage. They're turning it into a game room, and they're replacing that garage with a carport. And carports are permitted in this zone as long as they have covered parking. Well, they can have a carport or they can have a fully enclosed garage. The additions match the style and materials of the existing residence. And I think with that and with the standard conditions of approval, staff is recommending approval of the project. I do have a PowerPoint just for you to see it if you haven't been able to get on site and see the existing residence, if you'd like to see that. Would you like to see that?
That would be useful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this slide shows all sides of the elevation. As you can see here, can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there's the carport, and right behind it was the garage, or is the existing garage, and I guess you can see it better here. And this is the master bedroom side, where you can see the deck, and it looks like it is a single story structure on this side. Here I have a site plan for you, and floor plans. I think that the most interesting parts to me were the elevations, and then also these drawings. So you can see, I think the next one is going to show you the slope. Here, for instance. And then that's where you can see that it's a 2-story structure here from the exterior. Just go with one more here. There you go. And there's the interior elevation. And I think that personally, this one and then the exterior elevations kind of show what's happening the best. I hope I didn't go too fast through those.
Everybody has a copy as well, so.
Right.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
I have a couple questions, but I'm assuming the applicant's here, so maybe I could ask the applicant.
Okay, if you think the questions are more appropriate for the applicant, we'll hold them. Anyone else have questions for staff on this?
I'll just a quick question. So did we receive any comments from any neighbors or any indications that any neighbors have any concerns?
No, a hearing notice was sent out to all property owners within 300 feet of the project site, and we have not received any comments at all.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Is the applicant with us this evening?
Yes.
I wish I could answer that question for you,
Yes,
but
Sean?
this is a new experience with
Yes.
Zoom.
Actually, Sean Foster, the architect, is with us. So how do I get to that?
Thank you, Sherry.
Hold on.
Yeah, let's bring the applicant in, and then we can ask questions of the applicant.
Okay, Sean, he's at the top there. Allowed to talk or just promote to panelist here?
Yeah, we can promote panelists for this.
Okay, Sean is on. Sean, are you there?
Perhaps muted?
Yeah, I think he's muted. Sean, if you can unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm here.
Hey, good. It doesn't look like the owners have joined the meeting, but Sean's their representative
Right, terrific.
from Cornerstone Architects.
All right. Sean, what would you like to tell us about the project?
Well, the project's fairly straightforward. It's simple. It's a pretty interesting home with some great view corridors, split level. So it's 2-story and portion of the home, but not throughout. What we're basically doing is enlarging a pretty small existing kitchen area by creating a little pop out in that. It doubles the size of the existing kitchen area, but it's not pushing out beyond the existing envelope. So materiality will kind of be a continuation of what's there. And then there's the stuff on the lower level of the conversion. But kind of like I say, it's continuation of the existing architecture and working with the existing structure as much as possible.
And you're proposing a deck outside the master bedroom on the second level.
Correct. Yeah, and it's an it's an on-grade deck for all intents and purposes. It's pretty private over there by way of landscaping and the vegetation. And there's a great little view corridor that actually looks right across the valley. It was a nice opportunity. There's an existing landing outside of, an existing living room in front of the bedroom. There was a small landing there that just begged to get enlarged into a little bit.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any commissioners have questions for the applicant's representative? I think Commissioner Nolan, you did?
Yes. Well, first of all, I love what you're doing there. The architecture is really nice, and I think what you're doing is, within scale and appropriate. But I had 2 questions. The first question I had was, with regard to, it's a little mundane, but the septic tank, which is on attachment B, page 1 of 5, for my fellow commissioners. It's the last sentence. It said the residence is served by an existing 2,000-gallon septic system, which should serve to accommodate the additional bathroom. Is that something you've explored already? Because you said not shall, but should. And I don't know, as planning commissioners, and if we, usually we comment on utilities if there's a question. And I just wanted to verify that you had validated the 2,000 square foot, 2,000 gallon rather, septic tank.
You're adding some drainage fixture units, as the sewer district calls them.
Right.
Are you changing the population of the residents?
No, but we are adding a bathroom to the residence. So we've done kind of surface level investigation, knowing that it's a 2,000 gallon existing tank. It should serve well, be adequate. I'm going off of an old sales when the residence sold in 2015, I believe. I had a report. Septic was in good shape. It should suffice as to accommodate the extra fixture count.
Okay, just wanted to check on that. And if it doesn't, I'm sure you'll upgrade if you have to.
Yeah, that's.
My second question was on the exterior lighting. You show a sample of that fixture on. I've got my page checked. Oh, here we go. It's on A2.01, and I know that fixture is actually an up and a down light. So my question is, where are they going to be located in the building? Number one, and number two, are they going to be under an eave? Because I know they can shine up and down.
Well, actually, that particular fixture doesn't. It has a cap on the top, so it's directed down.
Cap it. Okay, I looked it up, and I know I'm familiar with similar lights, and they do have that up and down.
Yeah.
Okay, so you will be capping it, and that to make it dark sky friendly.
Definitely, and it was only in there as outside of doors of egress, particularly on the kitchen addition pop out. There's a new door there to the exterior. We'll put one on the wall there.
So even if you didn't have the cap on, there would be an eave over it, and it would still, the light wouldn't be shining directly in the sky.
Correct.
Okay. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Lottis, any questions? Commissioner Lottis, any questions for the applicant? Still with us?
Yes, I muted myself so my paper rattling doesn't interfere. So sorry about that. No, I don't have a question of the applicant. It was more of staff, and it was just a follow-up question to what Commissioner Nolan was asking about the lighting in it. So it's just more formality. Is the dark sky requirement, is that mandatory for this kind of a change or a modification to an existing structure? I'm just for my own information, just asking.
I'd like to defer to Lucas, please, on that one.
The answer is simple. It's a yes.
Thank you.
Whatever is in place, conforming or non-conforming, is still legal. But as you make changes, all the changes have to meet the current code, right?
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Commissioner Trent, any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just a quick question on considering that you're going to be adding on and putting an addition on top. Do you have any plans for like rainwater collection or any kind of conservation of water reuse?
We certainly could incorporate some rain barrels or something to that nature. I'm trying to recall. I think there actually is some stuff existing on the backside of the residence, but we have not had those discussions per se. But it's a situation where we could do that.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Keeping rainwater on the property is always a good idea, as we all know. Commissioner Swift, any questions for the applicant?
Actually not. I think we beat up the lighting topic a little bit. That was the first thing I went to.
Okay, very good. I don't have any other questions. Is there anything that you would like to add in summary, Mr. Foster?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Then we'll move to the public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Sherry or Lucas, do we have any members of the public waiting to speak on item 2?
I don't know if Bill Miley is, because he lives up there. I'll allow him to talk, and we'll see what he says. Bill, you're on mute. Did you want to talk on this item, or just...
Well,
we can hear you.
I don't have anything to say about this item.
Thank you.
Very good. Sherry, is there anyone else in the waiting room?
Not for this project.
Okay, then I will close the public hearing and we'll come back to the commission for deliberation. Thoughts, anyone? Vice Chair Nolan?
I think the project's fine. I have no objections. I'd be happy to make a motion, but let's keep the discussion going first.
I have some discussion items on the resolution itself, which you should probably do before a motion to approve.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Lottis, did you have something you wanted to come back to staff with?
No, I'm ready to hear your comments on the resolution.
Oh, okay, very good. Commissioner Trent? Nothing?
No, I'm good. I'm okay. Thank you.
And Commissioner Swift, anything to add to the discussion?
No, I like it.
Okay. I have some comments that I briefly discussed with, with this afternoon. And Maura, I guess maybe you should chime in here as well. On condition 5 of the resolution, can we all flip to that?
So that would be
Condition
page
5 refers to
6 of attachment A, right? That would be
On page 3 of 6?
3 of 6, attachment A, correct?
Yes.
I don't have that package open right now. On condition 5, it refers to the commission's ability to grant a time extension. It does not refer to the community development director's ability to grant an extension. And I'm wondering if we ought to add wording in there to make it clear that either course is available to the applicant if there are unforeseen delays. Nikhil, what do you think? Is that something we should do?
So the way it currently reads is that normally if you look at Title 10, Chapter 2, Article 32, timeless and extension, or I suppose if you want, you can delegate the power to the community development director to make that decision. It's ultimately it's up to you. I would say on that point.
Clearly, the Planning Commission is the reviewing authority and the approving authority on this item. But it seems to me, and I can't call out the paragraph for you right now. It seems to me there is a part of the code that independently gives the community development director the ability to grant a time extension for good reason.
That's correct. The director can do that. Just taking a look at
I think it would be fair to the applicant to include that so that they could start with staff. And if the director, say, doesn't want to grant an extension, they could come back to the Planning Commission and ask for one.
Right. So 10.2.3203 basically allows an extension of the entitlement. If the problem is if the matter originally required a notice public hearing, the director has to provide notice, but the director can then approve or disapprove, and Lucas's decision can be appealed to you. So if you want to change that finding to say, and I think this is what you mean, Steve, is that
the condition of approval, yes.
Yeah, unless such approval is extended by the director for good cause, either before or after the expiration of such either before or after the expiration of such time limit. Is that I think what
I was thinking along the lines of could be extended by the director or the commission.
Or the
commission. There may be different rules for each type of extension.
Right.
But it's fair to tell the applicant they do have that route.
I don't think there's a problem with making that change.
Okay. I would propose that anyway. On condition 8, this currently requires a landscaping and irrigation plan, and of course, compliance with MWILO, but there are requirements that there be a certain amount of landscaping area for those things to apply. And the submission, attachment B, page 1, says that there's no planned change to the existing landscaping. And so I'm wondering if we need condition 8 at all, or if we should qualify condition 8 by saying if the applicant, after approval of this permit, decides to make changes to the landscaping, then they need to go consult MWILO and the pieces of the code that say when you have to do a landscaping and irrigation plan. I'm not sure how to word that, or if it's necessary, or if we drop the condition. Vice Chair Nolan, please speak up.
Yeah, I just had a comment about that. I noticed that too, that, the applicant and the findings had said there would be minimal, if any, landscape modifications, other than the fact that they are putting in the carport, which means they're going to be, paving over.
Probably taking out fully, yeah.
Yeah, and so typically, I would say unless they exceeded, in this case, it would be like a renovation. I guess it would be then the 2,500 square feet. Then that would be the number that would trigger it.
It would be like what, 2,500 square feet of landscaping area or something like that, isn't it? Or is that for new landscaping?
But I'm wondering if
you recall?
The new project gets 500. If it's existing, if it's going to be like a remodel or renovation, it's 2,500. But I would like to hear from staff on that one. In a way, if you keep it in there, it just says that you shall comply with it. So if you're under it, fine, that means you don't have to do it, and there's a form you'd fill out. But if for some reason they do go over, they would still have to comply and fill out another form and make a submittal. So in a way, it's kind of a good catch-all if things do happen to change during construction, or there's a lot more grading than they anticipated in the process. But that's just my opinion. I'd like to hear what staff has to say.
Yeah, and I can comment on that. This is a standard condition that we use for really all projects that have a discretionary review. And it is kind of like a placeholder, if you will. We could modify the language slightly on this. It says the second sentence starts, the final landscaping and irrigation plan shall be submitted for compliance prior to building permit issuance. Or maybe a final landscaping. The reality is that it may not be triggered. They're identifying that there's no changes to landscaping, but when we get to the plan check level, when it goes through building plan check, I can tell you time and time again, not to say that all projects, but there are projects out there that maybe state one thing, but then going through the process realize they want to do another. And that's it's that catch-22. We're ensuring that what was originally approved going forward is consistent with what we're issuing permits for. So it's a checks and balances with this, and that's the reason for this standard condition.
Okay, I would agree. It's probably a good idea then to say that the landscaping has to comply with MWILO, and then if there's not enough new landscaping, MWILO doesn't force any other action by the applicant. I'm a little concerned about the second sentence that puts a hard requirement for a landscaping and irrigation plan when there may not be under MWILO a requirement for it.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Nolan, please go ahead.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the last sentence. And the first part, and I agree with Lucas, that it is a good placeholder because depending on what happens, and even if you are exempt, I believe, Lucas, you can verify this or not, but there's a form you have to fill out that said that you don't have to. comply with MWELA because you were under the amount. So,
Okay. So that'd be good to keep that requirement. Yes.
yeah, and so when it goes through plan check, you know, you should have this documentation of, yes, it was under the amount, or no, it was over, and then there's a submittal. So,
couldn't we say
at the end of that sentence, if applicable,
if required?
or if required,
Or if required by MWELO, yeah,
yeah,
that would work too. I just want to make sure that we haven't put a hard requirement where it's not mandated by MWELO. That's all.
yeah, yep.
I do have a question though. So, if they were doing enough area that did require landscaping, the planning commission would see the landscape plan with this review. Is that right? No?
No,
No, because
that would go back through staff in plan check.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we would be doing design review, and the project actually would be required to have a landscape plan, but we would not see it. I think that's a big gap in the ordinance, honestly.
Well, the thing is, if MWELO does not require a landscaping plan, then staff won't see one either.
Correct, but I'm like, if they get to the plan check stage, and because of the grading or whatever, they find that they did need to do a landscape plan. It's a little bit, it's interesting because that, to me, when we're doing a design review, we should actually be looking at a landscape plan. But if the applicant says, oh, no, we're not doing a landscape plan,
Because we're not doing any new landscaping, yeah.
Yeah, but in the end, they actually do. It's just. I'm just making a point that there may be a gap in the ordinance that
That may be something that we want in a review of Title 10 to suggest to City Council be changed.
Right.
The way it currently stands, if MWELO, if we approve it now and say you have to comply with MWELO, and they say we will, righto, and then they decide to do more landscaping, then essentially we have to trust Maura and Lucas to take a good look at the landscaping they plan until the rules change.
Right. There's a little bit of an incentive for an applicant to say, no, we're not doing any landscaping up front until later on.
Yes, that's true. But it would still go through staff. It just wouldn't necessarily go to
and
plan.
I trust staff. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just.
No. We love you all.
Yes.
Commissioner Nolan, please, or Vice Chair Nolan, excuse me.
I was going to comment that typically, for a design review, if there's usually like a certain amount of grading and disruption, typically whoever's doing, if it's the architect or the landscape architect or the civil engineer, they're going to generate and say, add up the square footage and go, hey, it's 2,500 square feet if it's a renovation, or if it's going to be 500. And you would, at least at the bare minimum, turn in the concept review, during concept review, preliminary plant plan and layout. So planning commission would have a chance to look at it. But in the case like this one, where they say it's going to be minimal disturbance, and they're going to fill out a form and say it's under 25,000 square feet, okay. But if they do change it and they do submit it, I will say in the past, a planning director actually called me in as a planning commissioner a couple times and asked me if I would look at the plan with them because they weren't familiar with all the plant material. And at one time at planning commission, we actually had, this was quite a few years ago, but a subcommittee of planning commission, and it was, landscape and architecture, where we get called in to look at projects and or if planning staff has some particular questions where they need a little more, expertise to look at it. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, perhaps we could do something like this. Add to condition 8 to say, as there is no current plan to require a landscaping or irrigation plan if MWELO subsequently requires it, that staff present that to the Planning Commission for review. I'm not saying that the applicant has to come back for another public hearing, but I don't know how much of what I'm saying is legal right now either. But it seems to me we could potentially mandate that we see a landscaping and an irrigation plan if MWELO triggers it. But I think, Lucas, that all comes before the building permit, right?
Yeah.
So what happens if they get a building permit and then change the landscaping?
Well, then they typically get potentially a stop work order depending on the level of review and extent in which they're modifying. I would just preface it with this. Look, California's, the MWELO that's currently in place has a pretty strict, and I know Vice Chair Nolan is well aware of this, pretty strict standards in which to follow by, and fairly strict standards from a watering standpoint, from a planting standpoint in terms of the use of drought tolerant. Those are all pretty much baked into the standards that we have currently in place within our code. This commission on occasion has seen a preliminary landscaping plan, which gives this commission a pretty good flavor of what to expect and to comment on those at that point. And remember that we're looking at a single family residential lot here versus multifamily or commercial. And so the threshold is measured slightly different than what you would have with other sites, which have potentially different viewpoints and I don't know, measurable components.
Right.
Where I think it's what I want to just kind of drive home here is it's stating that California, and this is a standard condition that is really applied to any of these projects, these single family homes that are coming before this commission for review. The California Model Water Efficiency Landscape Ordinance, that's a standard condition. How that gets measured, the second half to that, I think, in terms of what we're discussing, if required, does it then come back to this full commission? It's a bit of a leap to have it come back to the full commission. But if the commission feels that that's necessary for this particular project, then that is the flavor of the commission. But just know that that's not typical.
Well, I still would like to see that if required language in there rather than a hard requirement for the plans when they say they're not going to change anything. But if it is required, then the requirement to meet MWELO is still in there. So
I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
just add if required.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with that also, actually.
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay. Looking at condition 15. And this is one that we've been through a few times in the past. And I thought, had a discussion with Lucas this afternoon, I thought City Council had already changed the code to prohibit short-term rentals of less than 1 calendar month rather than less than 30 days.
Right, Steve.
It's the old question, how do you rent something for February and be legal? You can't right now.
Right.
But Lucas, did you find, or Nikhil, can you tell if there is if the language of condition 15 still mirrors the code, or should it be changed because the code has changed?
So 42402 in the definition still says 30 days.
They haven't changed it.
Still says 30 days. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to write to City Council and suggest that they're still banning all rentals of any property for the month of February. All right. Well, we'll leave it for the moment then because it mirrors the code. Finally, condition 19. This talks about address numbering. And my question is, since I didn't see anything in the package that said there was going to be any change to the address numbering, if the current address numbers do not meet the new code requirement, 4 inches and no gold or brass and stuff like that, aren't the current address numbers legal non-conforming? And can we actually force them to change the address numbering if they hadn't proposed to do so?
I can answer that.
Please go ahead.
It was a fire department requirement on their memo. We route the projects to the fire department, and that was in the memo from the fire department. They're requiring it.
Okay, I can see that. Can the fire department unilaterally require every property in the city to go back and redo their address numbering? I don't think that's within their ability, is it? I'm just trying to figure out, in every one of these cases, I want to make sure that the applicant is doing the things that are legal by the code and that the city is doing things that are legal by the code. And then we don't have to worry about someone challenging us in the future. So that's my question. Do they have to change the current address numbers to meet fire department regulations?
So, Lucas, what is the
if they don't meet the requirement?
Lucas, what is the current situation with their numbers? Or is that a question for Mara, I guess?
Well,
I mean, I'll answer that question. I don't believe they're in current compliance. This is really kind of a newer regulation that fire department places on. And I think really what it boils down to is the fire department's looking at gaining compliance with their current regs and standards. Typically that's done for new single family residents. That's where you end up getting this, not necessarily with an addition.
And so my question is, is it legal for us to put condition 19 in there if they're not planning to change the address numbering as a part of this project?
I believe that it is. And I think that through the building, and I'm sure, Lucas, please correct me if I'm wrong, but through the plan check process, we would have to check the addresses to make sure that they comply with the fire department standards.
What we could do in addition to this is follow up with the fire department after this meeting, potentially modify this condition that has some wiggle room whereby we can reach out to the fire department and verify that this is actually a requirement for an addition, period. I know I've seen this for new construction, but I haven't seen this for an addition. So it is a little bit puzzling on my end.
Well, it is a health and safety matter. I mean, it really is. It is important. And so, I'm fine if they have to do it. But yeah, I agree with Steve that we should check and make sure, have them revisit it. But another aspect of this is that house is way down that scary driveway. And I think the numbers on the mailbox may be the most important. Or at least it's part of how they're going to find the property. Maybe they need the
address number somewhere visible from the street. Sure.
Yeah. So the driveway's over like 150 linear feet, that they have to post it at the street. In other words, the fire department needs to see it. And this actually, I believe, is a very high fire zone, or I know it's high. It's not very,
definitely severe.
Very high. I mean, you'll find out as you're going to look it up. But my guess is, yes, they're doing it for new construction, but they also may, and once again, I'm not positive, be doing it for any newly permitted projects, which this happens to be, as a way to start making the changeover.
Well, there could be. So I don't know where this regulation comes from, but I would point out that our code has incorporated the California Fire Code by reference in Title 9, Article 9, Title 9, Chapter 1, Article 9. We've incorporated the entire 2019 California Fire Code by reference, and it's part of our building code. And so if there's a cross-reference to that, then I think it makes sense to include that. The problem is that we're imposing a condition of another agency, and I don't know if the building department has the reference for where this regulation comes from. I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea. I mean, I would caution, say, putting a condition here that doesn't really have any sort of cross-reference because it doesn't exist. It's not one of the findings that need to be made in our code, other than perhaps general health and safety. But again, I don't see a call out to that to make that determination on general health and safety.
Well, I did a remodel on my own home three or 4 years ago, and I knew with quite some certainty at that point that anything that I changed had to meet current code. But the parts other than we went around 60 places around the house and attached the old house, which had been there for 80 plus years, to the old foundation as well as to the new foundation. I said, okay, fine. But anything else on the property that I had not proposed to change, I didn't have to change, whether it was conforming or non-conforming. And again, I think this is a good idea to have good address numbers. I'm just not sure it's legal for us to require it on the parcel where it's not part of the project.
Well, I mean, they are making additions. They're making a change to the property, and this is a discretionary review, and this is a health and safety requirement in a very high fire hazard area. So personally, I don't have any problem with requiring this on the basis of health and safety, and that it's a discretionary review.
Okay. How do the rest of the commissioners feel about it? Commissioner Swift?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at condition 19 at the end. In the event that the house is set back more than 150 feet or the structure is not visible from the street, the address number shall be posted adjacent to the driveway entrance on an elevated post. So, I mean, they could always just put large numbers up on Signal,
Sure,
and not actually have to put it on the house. And I think that would be the better option, because they are down that long wooded driveway. So I don't have a problem with it either. I think it's a good thing.
Okay. Well, I'll withdraw the suggestion that we take out condition 19. Condition 15 is out. My comments. I still would propose changing condition 5 to include reference to the CDD ability to grant an extension, and condition 8 to add the words "if required" in the second sentence. So that would be my motion to modify the resolution.
Can I ask a question about condition 10?
Please go ahead.
I know we're all in a drought, short on water, conserving water, and I understand construction requires dust control. But this condition is in there about spraying water twice a day for complete coverage to mitigate dust. And I'm just wondering, when does saving water supersede dust control? Is that ever something that comes up? Is that something we should discuss? Because I'm on a lot of construction site, and there is an exorbitant amount of water being tossed around, evaporated, wasted, while we're all doing our best to save water. These sites don't seem to be restricted by that.
I would respond to that by it's asking for and requiring it to be done twice daily. There is this balance, Commissioner Swift, that I think you're alluding to, the balance of the dust mitigation versus the use of the water to apply that mitigation, right? So it's not asking for overly excessive watering. It's just looking for coverage to ensure that that dust during that construction.
At least the water is staying on the property and staying in the basin.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And
that is,
I think I think it comes from the APCD, the Air Pollution Control District also. I could be wrong about that, but Kathy?
could be.
Yeah, I was
Commissioner Nolan?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to mention, the devil's kind of in the details and how much do you want to detail out here? But depending on where the construction site is, if a lot of dust is created, then all those other people are going to start using water to clean up the dust. So there is this, question of balance. Like, do you control the dust at the source to minimize the air quality factor and the potential that other properties may start using water to clean up the dust?
And if you look, the way in which this is partially written, sorry to cut you off here, but it's not talking about saturation, it's talking about simply coverage.
Right.
To kind of keep that dust.
It's usually a light, but I hear what
when it's done properly, I mean, it should be heavy. They may not have their, and some of those sites, maybe they don't have their trucks, the flow set properly or something.
You don't want to be creating mud.
Yeah.
But it's a good point, and it's different on every site,
but I do think it comes from the Air Quality Control District.
I believe you're right on that one.
Okay. Any other points that any of the commissioners want to bring up? Okay. Well, I mentioned my suggestions for changes on condition 5 and 8. We can have a motion to approve without changes or to approve as amended if you all approve of those two changes.
So, Steve, if I recall, you made a motion.
I could make a motion to modify the resolution in those two specifics on condition 5 and 8, but there was never a second to that motion either.
I will second that motion.
So there is a second.
Okay, thank you. All right, then we need to vote on the amendment before voting on the resolution and the entire item.
Yes. So the motion, the appropriate motion here is a motion to amend the resolution with the amendments you mentioned, which I'm sure Lucas has written down. And just so we're clear, Lucas, Steve, the amendments are to delete condition number 15, modify condition number 8 to say if required, and then I don't recall if you had another amendment.
Deleting condition 15 is not part of the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's
Okay as
condition 5.
is.
It's condition 5, including reference to the director's ability to grant an extension.
Okay, so the motion which was seconded by Commissioner Nolan was a motion by Chair Quillisi to amend the resolution to amend condition 5 to say that such approval is extended by the commission or community development director for good cause, and then to also amend condition number 8 to say that the final landscaping and irrigation plan shall be submitted if required for compliance. And so that motion has been seconded. So I think, Steve, you can call for a vote.
Well, call for discussion first.
Oh, sure. You can call for discussion. I'm sorry.
It's good.
Sensing none, then Sherry, will you call a roll on the
And so
motion?
are you
to amend
adopting the resolution as well?
Steve, if I could stop you there, I think there was one discussion one member of the commission wanted to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Trent.
Yeah, quick question. On number 8, is there ever a time where the final landscaping irrigation plan shouldn't be submitted? I mean, is there ever
Yes, if
Is there always an irrigation plan, or is it?
my understanding, and Commissioner Nolan can verify, if the amount of landscaping is below a certain area in square footage, then no landscaping plan and no irrigation plan is required. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and I support it.
Very good. Sherry, can you call a roll, please, on the amendment?
And so you're not adopting the resolution?
Not yet.
Chair Quillisi,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nolan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lottis,
Yes.
Commissioner Trent,
Yes.
Commissioner Swift.
Yes.
Motion
Okay.
passes.
So we have an amended resolution. And now a motion to approve design review permit DRP 21-006, which includes the amended resolution, would be in order if someone would like to make it.
I'll move approval of resolution number 2106 to approve design review permit DRP 21-006 for revisions to an existing two-story single-family residence at 1124 North Signal Street.
Great. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Then Sherry, would you call the roll on approval of item 2?
Quillisi,
Yes.
Nolan,
Yes.
Lottis,
Yes.
Trent,
Yes.
Swift.
Yes.
Motion passes.
If Mr. Foster is still with us, tell him it's approved. All right. Then we'll move on to item 3, a discussion item, the special housing overlay SPL district sites. Lucas or Maura, I'm not sure. One of you, please take us through that item. Yes, Lucas.
Yes, I will. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Lucas Seibert, Community Development Manager here with the City of Ojai. The item we have before you this evening is a discussion item to talk about the SPL overlay sites for the upcoming housing element, which is the 6th cycle of the housing element for 2021 to 2029. What I'd like to do tonight with the presentation is walk through so as you recall, we had a meeting on May 2nd, and that was a special meeting to talk about the kickoff to this housing element. Well, staff's been diligently working and meeting with individual property owners who have requested this designation. So there are, I would say, a couple different parameters. There's existing overlay sites that we have currently. There are sites that are being considered for adding for tonight. There's sites that are being recommended not to be considered tonight. And then there's sites that are being recommended for removal from the SPL overlay designation. So I wanted to go through the state requirements as well as the HCD, or Housing and Community Development policies and guiding principles that they have. And I think those help to frame really where each of these sites potentially land and how staff came to the conclusions as a recommendation within the attachment A to this staff report. And they are, I want to say, 6 to 7 points that I think help to frame the discussion that we're going to be having tonight. And certainly because I do believe we have members of the community that'll be speaking on various sites as well, but I want to make sure that we all kind of understand the framework here. So for instance, it identifies, meaning the state is identifying sites not less than half an acre in size should not be designated. It then does the reverse to that and says sites not more than 10 acres in area or size should not be designated. So it gives kind of a floor and a ceiling in terms of how you are looking at sites to consider. It also, meaning the state, identifies vacant sites zoned for residential. So it's looking for that prime land to consider as a site zoned for residential. As you know, a lot of the cities, and I think our city is also within that framework, that there is not a lot of vacant land that's available that's residential for residential development. It's the sites are just far and few, and the sites that remain, typically those sites have challenges associated with them. So that's something to take into consideration. Another point is underutilized sites zoned for residential and at a higher density or intensity. So you have underutilized sites that are already zoned for residential, and then that could potentially be at a higher density or intensity. So it already has a base zoning of residential, and it's currently underutilized. Like for instance, if it's a single family home that's on a 15-acre piece of property, well, it's underutilized. Or potentially multifamily that has extra or additional open space that's not being used but still is a part of the overall site. That could be considered underutilized. Those are just some generic examples, not specific to the city. Additionally, sites not zoned for residential development but can be redeveloped for residential use via an adopted program action, which is really what this. So as an example of a program action, the SPL overlay is an action or overlay onto a specific site where the base zoning remains, but an overlay which allows for and provides what you could call an entitlement to be allowed for that property owner to be considered. And then the last policy that HCD has put out is also partially a state guideline, is sites owned or leased by a city, county, or city and county. So there's consideration when it's publicly owned that is given with these sites. HCD has time and time again, I've seen this in other cycles where there's favoritism given to sites that are owned publicly, mainly because there's more leverage associated with that. That's what I've seen in prior cycles. So with that, let's pause for a moment. Those are really kind of that's the framework in which we're working in tonight. Not coming forward, making recommendations, shooting from the hip. I use these 7 criteria, if you will, to frame the recommendations moving forward. Not giving any favoritism to any of these sites, but simply using this criteria. And just so you know, I mean, in terms of the different sites that we have for discussion consideration moving forward, in terms of the existing sites that we have on our books currently, staff is looking at 5 of those remaining. In terms of considering the addition of sites, there are 5 of those up for consideration. There is also 1 that is being recommended not to be considered, and there are 3 that are being recommended for removal. And that is based on, like I said before, I want to keep hammering this home, the criteria that I just mentioned and went through. At this point, I'd like to go through each of these sites kind of at a high level, and then if the commission has any questions after that, we could kind of go at a high level. I know that there is certainly members of the public that want to speak on this, and I'm certain that some of you commissioners, or if not all, will have questions on this on multiple sites more than likely.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do first is to share my screen. All right, can you see that?
Yes.
All right. So I'd like to start with the existing sites that staff is recommending to remain. And there's 5 of those. So the first one is 318 Bryant Street, which the owner representative is Bill Kendall. And that is actually located here. And I should preface it with where you can see my cursor. So the yellows that you're seeing here are the sites that are currently existing, and staff's recommending that they remain. The sites that you're seeing that are blue here, those are sites that staff is or have been considered for the addition. And then the sites that are in red, those are sites that staff is recommending be removed from the SPL overlay list. So the Bill Kendall site is staff is recommending that overlay to remain. The second of 5 is 1202 East Ojai, which is site 21. That's this site off of Ojai Avenue. The vacant building, which it's referred to as the bowling alley site. The third site is 408 to 410 Montgomery. That is actually city owned. It's a very small site located here. The third site is site 7, which is 510 East Ojai. A vacant site that has a vacant building. This is not really a vacant site, but it has a vacant building on the front, which was retail at one point. And the last site that staff is recommended to remain is site 6, which is 450 East Ojai Avenue. That actually has the skate park on the front. And it's a school district property. So those are the sites that staff is recommending remain. There is 5 sites that are being considered for being added. And I'll go through those here quickly. It's the blue site, which is 509 Grand Avenue, off of Grand Avenue here. You can see that site here, 3.65 acres. There's 414 East Ojai Avenue, which is 5.67 acres in area. School district property. And I should mention 509 Grand Avenue is privately owned. And it's owned by Michelle Wells. The next one is 514 Bryant Street. It's actually 2 parcels owned by the same property owner, Ann Adamson. The combination of those 2 sites is approximately 2.56 acres in size. Just to the south of that it doesn't have an address assigned to it, but it's Fulton and Bryant Street, with the size of that vacant lot at 1.44 acres. And then just to the west of that is 304 South Montgomery Street, and that's 0.62 acres in size. Now, there is one that the applicant property owner has, not applicant, but representative has requested it to be considered, and that is 1450 Maricopa Highway, and that's located here at 5 Points, Kuyama. I believe this is Church, and then Maricopa Highway here. And that one is recommended not to be considered based on, remember the parameters in which I was talking about before. The site itself is more than 10 acres in area. And then lastly are the 3 sites down here, site 9, 10, and 11. All these sites are city owned, one of which contains City Hall, which is site 10, and one of which partially is the Public Works yard, a portion of it. So with that, I'd conclude my presentation. If the commission has any questions, which I assume we will have quite the discussion here tonight, because there is a lot of sites up here for discussion and consideration. But also, we probably should at some point open it up for public comment as well.
Right. I think we'll do not discussion and deliberation, but specific questions for staff to clarify the presentation that's just been made. Then if we have members of the public that wish to speak, we'll go to a public hearing. Oh, it's not, we'll go to public comment.
Yeah. Right. It's not a public hearing, it's a discussion, but we want to hear public comment.
Any questions, specific questions for staff on what has just been presented?
Yes, this is Kathy Nolan and Kathy Lottison. I'm not sure if there's any other hands that are up.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Your pictures are very small now, so. Yes, please go ahead, Kathy Nolan.
Okay, so I do have a question, and this is about the 14.1 acre property at 1450 Maricopa Highway, and I realize that yes, it is over 10 acres. But my question is, I know oftentimes there's, some sort of a bonus or something similar that possibly could happen on a property. So I'm wondering if in a case like this, and I'm just throwing this scenario out there, if no more than 10 acres was developed as housing, potentially could the 4.1 acres be set aside as either integrated into the site as like green space or undeveloped space, and or somehow relate to the, like, for instance, the meadow across the street. I know there's a lot of drainage issues there. Is the 10 acres limited to the amount of development you want, or what sets that 10 acre criteria?
I mean, it's as simple as it reads. The site's not more than 10 acres in area. So, yeah. I mean, some hypotheticals could be drawn from that, where maybe only a portion of it is dedicated for affordable housing.
Right.
Or, I mean, there's a number of different scenarios, hypothetical scenarios that could play out. In terms of how staff was looking at this, we were looking at the way in which those sites exist currently and drawing conclusions from that way, versus I would say potentially the countless scenarios that could play out even on a large site like this of 14.1 acres.
Yeah. So, and then my other comment in relationship to that is, I realize that there are no other sites like that in the city, but at some point in time, there's always a first for something. And I'm not saying that you would develop over the 10 acres, and I still don't completely understand I would just like to know where the 10 acres came from. Like, what's the rationale behind that? I'm not disputing it. I just like to understand it better, if that information is available. But that I would almost like to leave it, up for discussion, but not take it off the recommended list at this point in time. If there is a possibility of being creative and maybe being a first.
Okay. Lotus, you have a question or two?
Yes, I just have two questions. So do you have any insight into why the one on Bryant, 318, that's the existing, that's currently SPL. Do you know how that happened and what was the background on that?
In terms of 318 Bryant being designated? Yeah. From the previous cycles? Mm-hmm. The history of that is actually quite extensive. It dates back to 2002, because really it was originally a part of this site here.
What? It was a condition of approval, or not exactly, or it was
I haven't seen a condition of approval specifically for that to be designated, but there was certainly discussions that went forward.
I see.
And the property at that point was agreeable to that being designated as an overlay.
I see. Okay.
And I mean, a part of this site, which is Site 17, years ago had actually had proposals for senior housing on this site. So it's certainly been considered at certain points, and it's not a site that was recently designated, but it has been part of development over the years in terms of affordable
You can
housing.
see it abuts the Whispering Oaks development, which is county owned.
Oh,
It does too, as well, to the east.
I see. Maybe that was part of the justification.
Right.
I suppose ultimately an interconnection could be made or something, but.
I think that was part of the idea. It was identified as a part of the Site 17 to have access to Shady Lane. There has been difficulties in trying to gain that, but conversations haven't been pursued in recent years, I mean.
Okay. And my second question. So once we designate an SPL site, does it kind of get set in concrete, or is the state amenable to change in the future?
Yeah, that's kind of the $1 million question, right? So we could take this forward as a proposal, build it into the housing element as a draft, send that forward to the state, because that really is that's the next step after it goes to city council. And this HCD could come back and say X, Y, and Z sites remove for the following reasons. Consider A, B, and C for the following reasons. And they'll have justification for each and every one of those. And then that's where kind of the magic begins on which sites do we move forward with. And a lot of times, and that's the reason for having a consultant, because they're battling for us as well. We're kind of taking that real first hard stab at these overlay sites, and based on really the guidelines and criteria that they've outlined. This isn't like we're making this up.
Right.
We're using their own guidelines and criteria to come up with these solutions. And what's even more encouraging is that we have several property owners that are interested in this. Previous cycles, I don't know if that's necessarily been the case, where you're trying to find sites versus sites coming to you.
Well, is there any mandate on these SPL sites to have them developed as rental housing rather than market? For sale units?
Sounds like it's just an additional entitlement that they could be developed for lower income housing, but it's not required.
It's correct. It does provide for an entitlement. And a lot of the times that discussion point happens at the point where a developer comes to the table asking and requesting for authorization to move forward.
Yeah.
We have that discussion regarding for sale versus for rent.
Okay. But the state, as of today, the state does not take a position on that. So with an SPL overlay, it's pretty open-ended in terms of what could happen on those sites.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Commissioner Trent.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the same kind of thing that Kathy was outlining, is just why the parameters of not less than half an acre, and then why the parameters of not more than 10 acres. I understand the bottom, the vacant site and the underutilized, but just curious on why those two items are listed there, not less than half and not more than 10. Just wondering what the rationale is behind that.
The wisdom of the legislature?
Yeah, it is. It's legislature, so it's law.
Yeah.
The second aspect is in conversations with HCD and recent cycles, like for instance with the 5th cycle, the idea is not to put all your eggs in one basket or to have such a large site that it kind of dwarfs the rest of the sites. Unless you have a bunch of large sites. Larger cities tend to have that as an option. We don't have that as a smaller jurisdiction. The same thing can be said for smaller sites, sites that are less than a half an acre. Those sites tend to be difficult to develop just based on their sheer size. And you don't necessarily get a whole lot of units out of those smaller sites. But having those sites intermixed within the larger sites, a lot of the times is favorable to HCD, meaning that you're seeing kind of a smorgasbord of sites coming forward versus all the same sites with having all the same conditions. In a perfect world, you'd love to see a bunch of vacant sites that are 5 acres in size. I don't know. I'm only using 5 because it's half of 10, right? So, but that's not the way in which this jurisdiction and a lot of jurisdictions work. There's uniqueness to each and every one.
Okay, and I'm assuming they're just guidelines, right? They're not hard and fast requirements.
Well, the half an acre and the 10 acre, that kind of floor and ceiling, that is built into state standards.
Law, not regulation.
Yep. So if you are identifying a site that's less than half an acre, you need some sort of justification to show that that site is favorable. And within the the Excel sheet that I provided here, like for instance with site 23, it's less than half an acre, but it's city owned, and there have been concept reviews regarding that site, and a similar site had been approved in terms of size within the city. So, and that site was less than half an acre, or right around half an acre. So there's justification for that. The 10 acres and over is an interesting slice to consider, simply because I couldn't find an example of one that's over 10 acres. Now, the argument of identifying and potentially being the first, if the commission so pleases, we would need to have some sort of justification for that. Just simply sending a site forward that doesn't meet one of those criteria, unless we have some sort of an argument for why to include it, the likelihood of that being nixed almost immediately is relatively high.
And I'd echo Lucas's. The HCD, they're fairly strict, and they push back often against cities when they're and their rationale is that you're approving this site that's never going to be developed, or there are too many impediments to developing it, and you're including it in your numbers, and they're going to push back.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I just have one more question, Lucas. But in I forget what the cycle is now. What is it? 6 years on the?
I know the cycle is every 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
So when the 8 years from now, we do the element now. We put in say additional SPL sites, and then 8 years from now, do we have to put in more SPL sites?
Excellent question. So let's say that the dust settles and the sites that are identified here end up moving forward as such. RENA ends up getting evaluated roughly 2 years out, a little bit earlier than that, depending on the methodology and whether or not there's revisions to that. And that's driven by SCAG, Southern California Area Government. So there's a lot of pieces that happen even before we start looking at these sites. The dust is settled in terms of what our number is. Each city within the Southern California Area Government, each of the 197, 177 cities, those have all been given numbers. Within Ventura County, all those have been given numbers. I provided that within the staff report on May 2nd. Actually, I think it was a part of the presentation. So our number is 53. our number is relatively low. And I think that is a testament to what staff, before I was even here, had done to ensure that our number remained low. If we're not at the table working to get that number low, then SCAG is going to assume that our number can be much higher. So working behind the scenes to ensure that that number is a true reflection of what we can provide within the city, I think is a true testament of what we're seeing here versus the 371 that we had identified in the fifth cycle that we're currently working through.
Okay. Commissioner Swift, haven't heard from you. Any questions for staff on this presentation here?
Yeah, I guess that the Maricopa Highway seems to be kind of the joker here, because I'm looking at site 9, 10, and 11, recommending to be removed from the SPL, and adding in the Maricopa Highway would be a nice swap. But if it's over 10 acres, and there's a high chance that SCAG's going to, is it SCAG or
HCD?
HCD would reject it, then it kind of seems like, unless we have a lot of justification and a lot of information to support that, we're possibly getting rid of the red and Maricopa Highway, and then we're left with what's left of the blue and the yellow. Does that provide us enough options? I mean, I just want to make sure we're coming forth with a full plate.
Lucas?
Oh, I can respond to that. Sorry. I thought that was just a general statement. So, okay. So I know, I just want to clarify something. In the agenda report that I provided on May 2nd, I had identified that 3 times the number, our arena number, could very well be adequate. I want to preface that with, there was no basis for that. There was zero basis. It just seemed like a reasonable number. And when I had talked to the consultant, they said, yeah, 3 times seems appropriate. Well, I went back to the consultant and I said, look, we said 3 times, where's that coming from? And in talking with them, they said, look, when we're taking this to HCD, they've actually got kind of a good rule of thumb that identifies more like 8 times, because there's a likelihood that they're going to be stripping away sites for various reasons. And that's to just save face on our end to ensure that we still have the adequate number of sites to move forward for the next 8 years.
And Lucas, you want to remind them what our number is, our arena number is?
Our number is 53.
Yeah.
So, so we have potential new sites, but we also have ADUs, and that's going, how does that fit into the calculation?
That is a great question. So previous cycles, it was extremely difficult to get ADUs counted towards our, we have an annual progress report that's required, that each city jurisdiction is required to report to HCD and OPR, which is the Office for Planning and Research. In 2017, I want to say, there was an Assembly bill or a state bill that came forward that now allows for jurisdictions to count ADUs. They just come under the less than market rate, so a moderate or median housing income level, versus, unless you can make justification for them to be less than that, that's really kind of the baseline. So we're able to count them, whereas in previous years, we were not.
So how many of those are there?
From this last housing cycle, or this last APR?
Yeah, ADUs that we've added since the 5th cycle started.
Overall, I would say it's probably close to 80. Just this last year, we had probably 24 or 27. So
does that count against the 53?
Yes.
And we would be projecting that out for the next 8 years, correct?
Yes. Well, projecting out, yes. The realistic numbers have kind of fluctuated over the last 8 years. Certain years there have been zero. But I would say these last 2 years we've had in anywhere between 15 and 20, 24, 27 units, ADU units that have been counted. So that to me is the bonus to what we're looking at here. And know that if we go to HCD and say we're not doing any sites, our ADUs are going to be sufficient, they're going to kick that back to us immediately and say, no, you still need to designate sites. You need to account for 53. And the ADUs are really kind of almost a bonus to what we have going on.
Okay, I think that was
So the
kind of what I
ADU,
was wondering about in a nutshell.
so you're saying the ADUs don't count against the 53?
No, it does.
It does. But we don't include them in our designation of sites.
All right. Commissioner Swift, you had a chance to ask questions. Are you done?
Is there ever an option to split that Maricopa Highway property in half and then have two? I mean, is that an option?
Yeah. So the reality is that with any of these sites, there's I would say an unlimited amount of different options that you could look at. Could you split it in half and then say only this half can be designated for affordable housing, and poof, we've got less than 10 acres being designated? You could. You absolutely could. But what I did here is I took each of these sites based on their current configuration, their current designations, whether it be underlying zoning and the overlay being considered on this. And on top of that, each of these sites were the request of the applicant. So,
okay.
Sorry, not applicant. I want to preface that these aren't applications that are in currently. Property owner or representative.
Property owner, yeah. Okay, I have a couple of questions. You covered the 3 times and 8 times. That's fine. But I'd like to come back, as Commissioner Swift did, to Vice Chair Nolan's original question. Because of this, let's look at 414 East Ojai Avenue. That's 5.67 acres, but it includes probably a couple acres anyway of landmarked property. So when you send in 414 East Ojai Avenue, do you say the potential there is 5.67 acres times 20 dwelling units per acre? Or do you use some smaller number than 5.67 to count against RENA numbers?
Yes, excellent question. So, as I had said before, this is including the entire site, not taking into account the reduction of existing uses and buildings that are on site. The consultant will be doing the analysis to break down each of these sites to see what the realistic number is. So there's this pie in the sky number that's being evaluated for each of these sites. And then there's something referred to as the realistic number. That's required to be provided by to HCD as one of their requirements. So here you're seeing 5.7, like for instance, the 414, Chair Quilisi, since you had mentioned that one, it's 5.67 acres in overall area, but there's several buildings on that site. And so you start tearing away the actual area that could be dedicated for affordable housing, given the existing buildings are on site.
Well, conceivably, all of the other buildings except those landmarked could be taken down and the area converted to lower income housing, right?
Correct. Again, a number of different options that could be considered for each of these sites.
Okay, but you said earlier, I think, that putting an SPL overlay on does not require a zoning change. So an SPL overlay could be put on, say, any of the commercial, the C1 properties out toward the east end without doing a zoning change. Is that correct?
Well, I want to preface, when you say zoning change, this is a zoning change. You maintain the base zone for each of these, but then you add a layer, an SPL overlay layer that allows for a specific entitlement. In this case, the specific entitlement is affordable housing.
And Steve, just to that point, when you overlay the SPL zone over something that's not zoned for housing, it's an illusory entitlement, because there's just no chance of housing ever being built in that zone because it's not a permitted use in that zone. So, for example, like commercial, you would, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you overlay in the commercial, your net is nothing because you're never going to get a permitted housing there.
Yeah, the only thing that I would correct you on, Nikhil, is, for instance, site 7, for instance, 510 East Ojai Avenue. With this site, which is an existing site, it's being mindful of the C1 zoning district, which does not allow residential to be facing the street, basically. So they've taken, during the 5th cycle, it looked at it from the standpoint of, well, the back half could be designated as residential and allowed to have multifamily or affordable housing. The front half would still remain commercial. And by designating that, you're then conceivably splitting up that parcel, but doing it very strategically. And at that time, HCD was agreeable to how that ended up working out.
Because of the commercial frontage requirement on Ojai Avenue.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, the whole site right now is zoned C1. That's what I'm trying to understand. You're saying we can have a C1 zoned parcel and we can then designate a portion of that parcel and put in lower income housing, and that's okay because we've now overridden the C1 zoning, right?
Yes. If that property owner chooses to use the affordable housing SPL overlay designation. Remember, it's not a requirement, which is the key point for us having excessive sites, more than the 53 designated.
But whereas it seems to be okay to designate a portion of a parcel that is not otherwise zoned for residential and put SPL type housing on it, it's not okay to go over to 1450 Maricopa Highway and designate a portion of that, which is already zoned residential for development. Am I missing something here?
You are missing nothing there. I would just say this. The reason why staff is recommending not to consider it is simply based on the size.
Okay.
As with, like, for instance, the commercial site that we're talking about, 510 East Ojai, where it was being mindful of that underlying zone to say, yes, absolutely, as a part of this, to be mindful of that zone and respect that zone, only half of it would be designated.
Well, I can see it's 4 separate parcels there as site 7. So maybe one stays commercial and the others you designate, and the consultant will have to figure out how much of that area total can be counted at 20 dwelling units per acre against our requirement of 53.
Right.
Okay. Another question. I understand site 10 that has City Hall on it, and it's government owned. It's actually being government owned. It's supposed to be more acceptable to HCD to have that in our list. Site 9, as far as I know, is vacant property. I see trailers and vehicles parked on it. I do not, and site 11 as well. I don't know what's down there. I haven't been to that site, but I have heard and I don't know if it was from you, Lucas, or from someone else, that sites 9, 10, and 11 are all part of the Libby Park master plan. And since none of them, as far as I can see, touch Libby Park, I'm a little confused at that. And in particular with Site 9, I don't understand why the city is resisting having a vacant parcel included in this. Is there some other condition on these 3 sites that says that says the city is not allowed to count them for lower income housing, or am I just missing something here?
So Lucas, just before I want to just address Site 10. Site 10, the big issue, it's in blue in your packet, is that there's a deed restriction on the property, which prohibits the sale of land and limits any use for public purpose. So that does not include housing.
All right.
So Site 10, housing cannot be built on that site.
Does that same restriction apply to sites 9 and 11?
For that, I would say no.
No.
I don't think that it's as specific within that deed restriction that was a part of the changing of ownership in 1973. But I would say, as a part of this, so the Libby Master Plan is a master plan that was last revised in 1993, but dates back to as early as 1973, which is right around the time that the City Hall site was purchased. It highlights improvements that start from Libby Park on the north side to Libby Park on the south side, and then traverse through Site 11 onto Site 10. It's interesting to read through that document over the years, because while it's not so when I think of master plans, I think of 2 different types of master plans. One that is a guiding policy that in some cases is adopted either by the commission or council, and one that has environmental clearance. And this one is more of the policy route, but a lot of times with this policy route, it ends up getting built on a per project basis over the years. And that's what I've seen with this Libby Park master plan, that it has been really used as a pretty hard and steady policy over the years, and has been updated in almost a 15-year perspective, although it hasn't been updated since 93. But if you look at how that master plan is being applied to what we see here today, a lot of it is very, from a visioning standpoint, is very similar, if not the same. And that's why there's such consideration given to that policy, to be respectful of that policy moving forward. I'm not sure that was completely known. Certainly, I don't believe that although I wasn't here during the 5th cycle, that the deed restriction was known for Site 10. Had that been the case and we would have taken that forward, HCD would have told us not to move forward with it.
Right.
In terms of Site 9, I would just state this. So I know, Chair Colosi, you had mentioned that the eastern half is really a kind of a dirt lot. The western half is where City Hall basically parks. So think about it as a really kind of more of a parking lot that helps to support the uses for Site 10. And to designate that as affordable housing, with the idea that affordable housing could move forward as an entitlement sometime in the future, while we have, controlling ownership over that, we meaning the city. You don't want to,
it runs all the way over to Blanche Street. Okay.
Yeah, it runs the entire.
Got that part. What about Site 11? What's there?
So the northern half is vacant parcel, and then it has this kind of steep terrain that pushes to the south and to the east, and then the southern half is the last portion of the public works yard. The reality is that if you look at the Libby Park master plan, it shows a pathway going through a portion of this into the future, and then connecting to Site 10. So there's been always this idea and vision of both of these sites being being a part of kind of the Libby Park master plan expansion or improvements.
So does site 11 actually abut part of Lower Libby Park?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, if it does, it's like the lower right-hand corner. It's a very small portion of it. And in fact, it may not. There may be actually a road that separates the two.
There is also on the slide that you have in front of us, a large section of land on the west side of Ventura that is between sites 10 and 11. Now that's where we've had a demonstration garden in the past and potentially other things going on there now. Is that city-owned property?
Yes. Yeah, this entire site is inclusive of what you're talking about, meaning site 10. With the demonstration garden and all of those improvements to the south. It's really kind of, you're talking to the south of City Hall.
To the south of City, but it's not marked either in red or blue or anything else on your chart.
Because the area I think you're talking about is this area here.
No, I'm talking about the area immediately to the right, to the east of the lower portion of Site 10 and to the west of Site 11.
That's residential.
Where you have your cursor now, is that city property?
No, that's privately owned.
Those are all residential properties right there.
Yep, this is all residential to the
Okay.
south here.
I can't see it clearly enough. I'm still disturbed that we think it's okay to designate a portion of some sites for development and a portion not for development, but we are uncomfortable doing that with 1450 Maricopa Highway. And I think it's, since the SPL overlay doesn't affect the basic zoning, and in the case of Maricopa Highway, it's already residential, I think, but we're willing to designate only a portion of a site in other places for development and count it against our RENA numbers, but we're not willing to do that on 1450 Maricopa, even though the parcel owners are requesting it. I'm amazed at that.
Now, Chair Quillisi, could we pause for a moment? I know we're getting into the deliberation. I feel like we're getting into deliberation. I'd like to have public comment, but I appreciate the conversation that's going on here in the deliberation.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand the rules of the game. If there are no other questions for staff, then Sherry, do we have people under public comment who wish to talk? They're in the waiting room or whatever?
Yes, I've added William Wyrick is on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Number one, I requested, and Lucas has ready to put on a screen, a fairly sizable piece of city property, which I think ought to be considered for the list. And that is 3.64 acres of city-owned land. It's approximately 180 feet wide and 788 feet long, stretching from West Eucalyptus to Raymond. And I was wondering, I really would wonder why we aren't including that for staff evaluation and consideration. It's a big piece of property, and it actually, I think that's the incorrect. I think that's incorrect. What you drew there, that's not the publicly owned strip. You see the strip that says Libby Avenue?
Is it this strip here?
Yeah, that's 180 feet wide. by 780 feet long that stretches from Raymond. It's a part of Libby right-of-way that was never built. That is simply open space. It's approximately 180 feet wide, according to the assessor's parcel map, and 788 feet long. And I just wonder why it's not being evaluated. I would like to see it evaluated for possibility of affordable housing support, especially since at least there's a proposed development agreement, including the Maori cottages, which include affordable components. So I wanted to I have a couple other comments to make, but I was wondering if Lucas, you could respond to why that piece of city property should be evaluated by the consultant.
I can respond just generally. I mean, I'll have to admit, I haven't done the full analysis like I did with the other properties, but just looking at it, it looks like it says Libby Avenue. It looks like it was either vacated or just never developed.
Oh, it's a city right of way that was never built on.
Okay. The challenge.
City-owned property right of way that was never built on.
So if we look at the in terms of how it would be tested, so is it less than half an acre? No. Is it more than 10 acres? No. So it checks those two boxes, and then we look at, is it a vacant parcel? Yes. Is it city owned? Yes. So it looks like it actually meets a lot of the tests that are put to task from a criteria standpoint. My only concern with a site like this, in terms of a staff recommendation, and obviously it's to the will of the commission tonight, is it looks like it was at some point just an undeveloped road. So if HCD is looking at this and they're looking at it from a square footage standpoint, it's checking the boxes. When they actually look at the site, it's more linear than it is square. I think there's challenges that exist in terms of its dedication as an SPL overlay. Not to say that it's impossible, but I think it's met with some potential challenges.
What I was, there's been discussions in the past about doing sort of an imaginative, small modular homes with almost a linear park atmosphere that could be quite attractive and still affordable, especially since the city would be contributing the property. But anyway, I just wanted to throw it out there because it is 3.64 acres. Yeah. And it could include some, I think, some interesting design elements. Anyway, that's one suggestion. Then could I make some other, Chair Quilisi, could I make some other comments?
Of course.
Okay.
The 3 minutes
one
are up,
is that it didn't get stated, but it is important to state that the last housing element, our current housing element, includes discussion of accessory dwelling units, potential build out, as well as the compliance program, which we did implement. And that was part of what helped us with getting the last housing element approved, was that part of our IHCD was to have that. That was a program, in other words, in our housing element, the compliance program, and I think it helped us get approval.
And it's a continuing part for this cycle, then.
Well, I'm just saying it. I think it helped with the last cycle. It was part of our housing element in our current housing element. Number three. One other comment I'd like to make is I believe that the site 17, correct me if I'm wrong, Lucas, isn't that the site that was subject to a pro-affordable housing, senior affordable housing referendum years ago?
In the 2002, 2005 era?
Yes.
Yes.
There actually was a vote on the ballot supporting that use for that site, as I recall.
Yeah, I think it was Measure G is what you're talking about.
Right. So I wanted to state that for the record for the commission, that that's another aspect of that site's history. as a city council member, Chair Quillisi, one thing you want to see is when you're submitting something for state approval, you know, to put their compliance stamp on it. One thing you don't want to do is to have any red flags that they immediately draw their attention to. Oh, well, they didn't even follow our guidelines. So whether or not the 10-acre maximum makes sense or not, I can tell you as a council member, I'd be very reluctant to try to say, oh, HCD, we want compliance, but oh, by the way, you know, we didn't even really, we're doing something here to attract your attention that doesn't meet your guidelines. I'm not sure we want to, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure that we want to have a red flag when we're trying to get timely compliance.
Sure. If that property were subdivided into parcels smaller than 10 acres.
But there's no way that that's going to happen before it's submitted to HCD.
But it won't happen.
My understanding, and Lucas can correct me if I'm wrong, that they have to be entire parcels submitted. You can't have anticipatory subdivision into subdividing as part of the HCD application for the submission for compliance. I guess what I'm trying to say is that that's a long process to subdivide a property, and I don't see that happening before this element has to go in to meet the deadline to HCD.
Okay.
Just a thought. I know I'm taking too much time here, but I just wanted to also say on the issue of Libby Park, if you and those elements on those parts of City Hall, that actually came to that. We actually did consider under the existing house element availability, and the staff report alludes to this. There were a lot of public hearings, council soliciting public input, and the one of the key things that HCD is looking for is realistically available. And the response of the community and the eventual vote of the city council was pretty much that was on site 10 was, you know, we're not even going to look at this any further. It was kind of an overwhelming public response, one of the largest public responses I've ever seen in Ojai. And the other part about site 11, there is actual, if you include the public works yard is actually part of Libby Park as originally designated and as described in the master plan. It is contiguous all the way from Libby Park through the public works yard to site 11, and then you have the street, and then it continues across the street. So site 11 is actually contiguous to Libby Park if you consider it part of the public works yard, and other parts of the public works yard are in fact contiguous to Libby Park.
Okay.
Just pointing that out. So that's all I wanted to say. I just, I've always wondered about that site, that 3.64 acres, and why we don't do a formal evaluation of that site.
Now we would need to if we take it off the list.
Oh, no, that's the one that's not on the list now.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Libby
3.64 acres.
Avenue extension.
Stretching between Eucalyptus and Raymond is not currently been evaluated, is not on the list to be evaluated.
Right.
That's what I'm wondering about.
To follow up on that, I have a question for Nikhil.
Yes.
Is there a restriction on commissioners voting on a list if they live within 300 feet of any of the parcels on the list?
So what
I live within 300 feet of that piece of property that Mr. Wyrick is talking about.
So just to be clear, that what we're doing here is recommending sites to be included in the overlay zone. So we're not actually making any decisions as to these sites. And so my initial read would be that I don't believe that there would be a conflict because we're making a recommendation to staff. However, again, and it's within 300 feet, which is actually pretty close. Do you border the site, or you about the site?
No, there's a property, there's a residential property and a flag lot driveway between me and that property. And I understand if it's a question of developing the property, then I would have to recuse myself. I'm just questioning whether I have to now.
I would say that, I don't believe that that because it's a recommendation to staff, there's no real decision being made. However, I would say that perhaps in the interest of, I guess, to protect the commission, I would say that you really don't need to recuse yourself, but you can. It's a personal decision on your part.
But that's one of 20 or so sites.
Right.
So do we vote on them separately?
Yeah. Well,
this is from all of it.
No. So what I would say is that because we're making a decision that collectively applies to the whole city, and so this is a zone that it covers the entire city. So the problem is that 25% of the city population is within 500 feet of it, or 300 feet of any one of these sites. And so given that, I don't think a recusal is necessary here, because this is a general recommendation of imposition of a zone. And so
want to make sure I'm not breaking any rules. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, Sherry, I'm sorry. Kathy, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about the lot that Mr. Wyrick just brought up. The one west of Eucalyptus and south of Raymond. I've actually walked that entire property, and it really is only the width of a narrow road, and the upper portion of it is very, not that you can't do grading, but of course Raymond is higher than Eucalyptus, but it's, rocky and kind of inaccessible. Not that you can't do anything with development, but I guess my biggest question would be, even if you did something, with narrow, small buildings, the accessibility would be a little bit of a challenge. But I guess it could be explored. I just see some site constraints. I think that's probably the best way of describing it, that may play into selecting that particular lot. Or parcel, rather.
Okay.
Just a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Sherry, you have another person who wants to engage in the public comment?
Bill Miley's on. And he's muted.
Hi, Bill, you're muted. Bill, you still there? Well, maybe we can come back to him.
We have Bob Ward.
I'm here.
Oh,
You
I'm here.
Okay. Bill, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Okay, don't mind. I was going to say a few things about site 10 and 11, because we've been involved with that in 2014, 15 about people self-help. But that's fine. Let's just take it off and develop the Liberty Park Master Plan. One important factor is that SPL sites, as I remember it, need to have easy access to city services, community stores, businesses, and public transport. And some of these don't. I happen to like 1450 Maricopa. I heard when Ted Moore told you that he's working with the owners and they're interested in a mixed-use affordability overlay, and that they would possibly consider up to 220 rental units in mixed housing, various prices, rentals. Another factor is the issue of congestion. And I think that 14-acre site would allow possibly up to 10 acres of affordability housing mixed, and then 4.1 acres of open and green space. If you look at the Grand Avenue, 509 Grand Avenue, that's 3.65 acres, and that can have up to 70 units SPL overlay. And that would be really congested for the people living there, as well as the community with all the cars back and forth. So I think that 1450 Maricopa, in spite of what has been said about the state, they would be probably willing to negotiate that if the owner and Ted Moore would be willing to own it. That would be a wonderful site. It would be less congested for people. It would be mixed use. There would be open space. They would be not be living wall to wall. And I think it would benefit our community greatly. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Sherry?
Yeah, we have Bob Ward on, and William Wyrick raised his hand again and had more comment.
Yes, sir, Mr. Wyrick.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. That was an errant hand.
Oh.
Oh, so you,
Okay.
okay.
Then we'll come to Mr. Ward.
Well, thanks for asking, but I don't have any questions or comments at this time. I'm just listening and learning. Thank you.
Great thing to do. Thank you very much. Sherry, who's next?
Jeff Becker. We also have Denise Wiseman who's on, but she's just listening and doesn't want to speak this evening.
Okay, Mr. Becker.
Good evening. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Good. I just wanted to comment on Mr. Wyrick's discussion on the project area between Eucalyptus and Raymond. Years ago, we had actually tried to include that as part of our Mallory Way review of our project there. And after multiple discussions with the council, and even after an appraisal was completed on our behalf, they actually directed us to not include it. And then we were further directed to include a access park that would actually go through that site that Kathy walked through up to Raymond. And then it's to be attached and included through the cottages among the flowers. So it would actually run, you could in essence walk from Aliso all the way up to Raymond. So the theory of adding housing there would be interesting, but I'm not sure that the city and the neighbors would be too thrilled about it. And there was a lot of planning that was gone through that. So anyway, I just wanted to add that to the historical backdrop. Other than that, you know, it sounds like the sites are all pretty interesting. So appreciate you guys' time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have
Sherry?
Michelle Wells.
Please unmute, Michelle.
Hi, thanks everyone. I too am just really listening and learning. As Lucas mentioned, my husband and I do own 509 Grand Avenue, which is one of the properties under consideration. That property has a 1920s and 1950s built kind of original farmhouses, and it's really surrounded by much more dense, some multifamily, some affordable, and some smaller lot single family. So it certainly feels like it feels like it deserves some more density, and we appreciate the consideration.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Lynn Goodman.
Please unmute, Lynn. Down in the lower left corner of your screen, there's a little microphone that currently has a line through it. Click on that and you'll be able to speak.
Got Nick Oatway next.
Okay, Mr. Ojai, please go ahead.
Well, thanks for your work. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What's the reason number 9 is being eliminated? I mean, specific from Lucas. Is it because we'd have to build over the parking, or we don't want to build over the parking, or? Hello?
Yeah, Nick, is that your only question? I'd prefer to answer them all at the same time if that's the only question.
Oh, okay. And the other question is there a process for for requesting from the public other properties to be included in the SPL, specifically commercial properties with residential overlay from the SPL? Is there a process in place? That's it.
I'll respond to both of those. So speaking and responding to site number 9, like I was saying previously in the conversation, I believe it was with Chair Quillisi, and on the framework of the Libby Park Master Plan. While the Libby Park Master Plan doesn't include this site specifically, this site specifically is being used for parking for City Hall and to benefit those uses directly to the south. There's currently pickleball that we have that's kind of an active use that's along the eastern side of Site 10. And there's the potential for other uses that would facilitate the need for additional parking. So keeping that and understanding that that would remain as parking into the future, I think is an important feature when looking at this site. If you were to designate this and we had housing advocates and nonprofits coming forward wanting to potentially purchase the site or even develop the site, we potentially lose that leverage for public parking and I guess presumably public purpose. So
Well, there wouldn't be a reason for considering building affordable housing. I'm saying attractive affordable housing over the parking, thus producing parking under shade as well as affordable housing.
there is the opportunity for that. So that gets back to the many different considerations and potential opportunities for each of these sites and different scenarios that could play out. That is one of the scenarios that could play out as a part of this. A portion of that could be designated for affordable housing, and then also the requirement through the affordable housing agreement or even a development agreement that required the preservation of a certain number of public parking spaces.
I appreciate your response. I'll just say, I think my own experience with general plans is that they came about to separate all these uses, and that's why we have all these different elements, and we don't think like an urban area where we have overlays of all kinds of different uses going on. But it seems like in the future, it wouldn't hurt us to consider, at least in a minimal sense, overlaid uses as creating a more lively interior downtown Ojai. That's why I asked my second question, is there a process in place for people with commercial properties or other uses, office properties, to suggest SPL type of solutions for the affordable housing issues we all face?
Excellent question. So, Nick, to respond to that, the process that staff has been working through is we have provided notice in the paper on more than one occasion, and that paper is of general circulation that provides, and not only that, but we actually posted it on Facebook as well as through social media, identifying the opportunity for those that are interested in hearing about the housing element, and then eventually what we're here tonight for, which is the SPL overlay, to comment, to bring forward the potential for proposals or for interest in including the SPL overlay on their site. The response to that is what you see here tonight, which is several sites where individuals have requested for that overlay to be provided on their specific site, whether they are property owners or representatives. The interesting thing is of those, staff then evaluated those sites based on the criteria provided by HCD and state requirements. So is there like an official close date? I would say probably tonight would be considered the official close date. It's difficult when you're moving forward if you continue considering other or additional sites as a part of this process. Could an applicant come forward and independently move forward with an SPL overlay? Yes. As a request, yes, absolutely.
Is that a ministerial decision or a discretionary decision?
That is a discretionary action, a legislative action, in fact, that requires both a zone change as well as a general plan amendment.
Well, thank you, Lucas. Even though I come into these Zoom meetings at a late date, I really appreciate your presentation.
You're very welcome.
It's a 100% increase in my understanding of the whole thing.
Cindy Jones.
Thank you very much, sir. Sherry,
Cindy Jones.
please unmute Ms. Jones.
Hi, this isn't Cindy, this is her husband, but I don't have any questions. I'm just kind of interested in following along and finding out the works that you people do, and thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to have people interested in what we're doing. Sherry, who's next?
That was it. That's all.
That's it. Okay. Then we have reached the end of public comment, and we'll come back to the commission for deliberations. The recommendation right now is that we provide a recommendation. The recommendation from staff is to provide a recommendation to City Council on all or a portion of the sites identified in Attachment A. So what's the pleasure of the commission? Go ahead, Commissioner Noland.
I hate to bring this back up, and I want to say that I did listen to staff and to our city council member. This is in regards to the Maricopa Highway, 1450 Maricopa Highway, the 14.1 acres. I'm wondering, you'd have to have a really good reason for apparently HDC to say, oh, yes, we would consider it. It's over 10 acres. But the reason I bring it up is if you look at all the parcels, we don't have parcels that are, that large considering the size of the valley and open space or potential spaces where we could do something. So I'm wondering if that would validate, an argument as to why it could be included. And then also part of the recommendation would be that possibly only 10 acres of it gets divided or some sort of creative legal way to fall within the 10 acres. But we are taking off. I mean, if we decide to follow the staff's recommendations, like the city hall was 8.79 acres. Of course, it's not all buildable, but when you take off the other ones, I don't know. I would be tempted, to see how our discussion goes with that, to include it with good valid reasons as to why.
Understanding the city council, at least in Mr. Wyrick's estimate, would strip it right off.
Yeah, but once again, we are making a recommendation. I suppose we could say why. It goes to city council, and they may go, oh, that is good, that is valid, or they may just go, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do anything over 10. But at least if in fact, as a commission, we decided to put it in the recommendation, we would have to do it with good reason.
Question, Lucas, if we took the recommendation from staff right now where it is, all these blue and tan or yellow or gold or whatever color properties, what is the total potential lower income housing of those properties without 1450 Maricopa?
Without 1450? I can run that number real quick here. I want to say it's in the 500 range, but let me run that number real quick here.
And then we have to understand that portions of some of those parcels are going to be stripped out already because of landmarking, or we need to maintain commercial zoning or something. So do we get to where we have 8 times 53 is the question.
I think we're pretty close. I ran some numbers, but I'm going to wait for Lucas because I only ran it through it once. See what he comes
Yeah, I did that. I got to 475 or something, but that was not counting eliminating portions of some of the sites from the calculation.
Suppose it doesn't have to be exactly 8 times, but if it's pretty darn close, one way or the other, you know.
But I don't know how much is stripped out. Probably not enough to worry about, but it would be good for us to know, I think.
Kathy, you're muted. I see you're talking.
Yeah, I when we report to HCD, yeah, I get it. We, you know, it's a commercial zone currently, and we can only use a part of it. But if we're actually coming to
or a PL zone, and we're only going to use part of it,
or PL zone. But when it actually comes to development, there's no reason we could not change the zone and the general plan to accommodate full use of the site for housing. I assume.
Which part are you talking about?
Except at 414, we have a landmarked property now. And
yes, that's right. But that landmark building could even be used for housing. Right?
Yes, conceivably.
I mean, it doesn't have to be new. Anyway, I there's a little more flexibility in terms of what we would be looking at with actual development versus the current situation as we need to report to HCD. That's my only point.
Yep. As I had said before, there is a number of different options, countless, if you will, for each of these sites in terms of how they could potentially be developed and what could be developed on that site with affordable housing. Just to let you know, I ran the number, so we're looking at about 443 if what staff has recommended in terms of the removal of Site 9, Site 10, and Site 11, and not considering 1450 Maricopa Highway. Your magic number is 443.
That's what I got.
That's just over 8x.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, I personally like the idea of smaller sites that are distributed throughout the city, and we can get very good design. I thought we had a good design with that project, the property on at 408, 410 North of Montgomery. I mean, it was pretty interesting. It was 4 or 5 units, but the other sites are generally bigger, and I don't like the idea of a massive a number of units that are all all affordable, or at least a huge part of them. And I like spreading things around a little bit and smaller sites. I just think, you know, it fits in with the community in general much better. The 1450 Maricopa Highway might be great in the future. I'm just feeling like it's a little premature maybe to look at it on this round, but in the future, when there has been more thought put into, you know, how that could be divvied up, maybe it would be more ripe to include in a housing element cycle. But that's.
I agree with your part about the smaller lots. It's actually, they're more integrated into the fabric of the community. And, I was saying about Maricopa Highway to possibly include it, but you're right. I mean, I don't know how much we can recommend, but I would definitely, if it was included, want a fair portion to be green space so that it wasn't just a massive housing project there.
Right, right.
With more in context with the entire community, but we can't necessarily designate.
Well, I have a qualification on that other site on Bryant Avenue that would be something like that. I'm not really thrilled about reserving more housing over there on Bryant Circle. I just, I've said it before, and I still feel that that is our only industrial area over there.
Right.
And I think that we need to be protective of that and not give it up lightly for other kinds of uses that can go many other places in the city. So I really want to be very cautious and really think it through. So given that, I'm not really thrilled about 214 Bryant Street being added. But if that were to be done, I could, what I could see out there, I suppose, in some sense, is sort of live work units where the work activity was really industrial related, maybe, large sculpturing or I don't know, but where the work would have aspects of industrial use and yet people could live there. But I would really want to see some sort of limitation, but I don't think at this point we talk about any of that in terms of what goes forward to HCD.
Right. I agree with you.
It's just a personal opinion about it.
Yeah. The other nice thing about, and I hear you on Bryant Street, I guess one bonus would be the access to the bike trail too, as far as transportation or walkability into town, because you've got that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm concerned about that too, that being our only industrial area, but agree, it would be great if it was like a live work.
That would be the one possibility that I think I could get behind. It could really, maybe that could work. But
what's your sense of all of this? Do you want to take a vote on each of the sites, or do you want to pick out particular sites to vote on singly and then the rest as a group? How do you want to eventually make a recommendation here?
I mean, in general, I'm good with the staff recommendation, with some reservation on 214 Bryant, but maybe there's some particular, maybe we should just go site by site. There's not that many, I guess.
There are about 15 or 20 of them, I think, total. Between those that propose to be left on, those that are proposed to be taken off, and those proposed to be added.
Well, maybe we could start with the staff recommendation and look at those, and then look at the.
See if the staff recommendation gets 3 votes, and if so, then we don't have to worry about individual sites.
Okay.
So does anyone want to make a motion to that effect? We may not be dying for lack of a second. We may be dying for lack of a motion.
Yeah. So the motion here is to accept the staff. Anyone who is proposing a motion here would be to accept the staff recommendations as to removal, inclusion, and retention of sites in the as laid out in the staff report for the SPL zone.
Yep. Anyone want to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the exact wording, but
I think Nikhil said it well for us.
Yeah.
Is there a second to that motion? Well, for discussion purposes, I'll second the motion. Let's discuss that now. Should we accept in toto the staff's recommendation? Anyone?
Well, just for the sake of discussion, I'm generally in agreement. You know, I think there's just, you know, that the parcel on Maricopa Highway that could potentially work with, you know, modifications. And then also, as Kathy Lottis mentioned, the one on Bryant Street, potentially with, you know, modifications as well, which would mean like, say, a live work. And I don't know if, I mean, I guess this would be my question for staff. I mean, can we go to that level? I mean, we're saying it's pretty broad stroke, but can we say, yes, like we agree with a certain site, but there would have to be some, I don't know if restrictions are the right word, but some sort of a variation of what they could do there.
Remember, all we're talking about here is, do we designate it as potentially developed for low-income housing?
Yeah.
If there is any actual development proposed in the future, that comes through the commission.
Right. Okay, so that answered my question.
Right. Yeah.
So we can't add it to the SPL zone with caveats. It's just added or not added.
Gotcha.
That's all I needed to hear.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Well, can we talk about the staff recommendation minus
Oh, Kathy Lottis, you
1450?
froze.
Oh, am I frozen now?
No, you're okay.
I'm okay. I think Chair Quillisi is frozen.
You're closely froze.
Uh-oh. Our leader. I'm wondering if we can look at talk about the staff recommendation, but minus. I guess I didn't think 1450 was part of the staff recommendation.
Well,
The staff recommendation was that it not be included in the list.
Included.
Okay.
So each one says, you know, if it's in red, if there's red notes, then it's not recommended.
Yeah, I would say probably the confusing piece for like attachment B in terms of the visual is 1450 is the same color as the rest of the.
Oh, right.
Bidders.
Yeah.
So the confusing part is I left it that way because I wanted to have that discussion. But in terms of the recommendation within attachment A, which is the Excel sheet, it identifies not to consider it as a staff recommendation.
Well, could we take a vote on the staff recommendation minus 1450 Maricopa, and then if other people want to talk about other sites, we could do that separately? And
well, the motion right now is pending. You could propose a substitute motion or a new motion to accept the staff recommendation with the exception of 1450 Maricopa, and that would be voted on first before, and then we would move to Commissioner Trent's motion.
Okay.
That would be an amendment to the current motion.
A substitute motion?
No, so the way it would work is that it would be a new motion. So there's a motion on the table. You're asking for another motion, and if there's a second, then it would be voted first.
That's first.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will move to consider the staff recommendation minus 1450 Maricopa Highway.
So you're adding it back in, Kathy?
No, minus Maricopa.
Well, it already said
Staff recommendation is that
not
1450
included.
will not be counted.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure.
Consider that. I'm still confused by that. I'm trying to clarify the math here. So
Okay. Yeah, on the Excel sheet, it's probably easier, but I didn't mean to butt in, but I knew you didn't want it in there.
Okay. Staff recommendation. Consider that.
Back to the original motion.
Wait, that was the original motion, right?
So
Okay.
your motion would be the same as Commissioner Trent's motion.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It's almost like a second.
Yeah.
I think it was already seconded by Steve.
It was, for the sake of discussion.
For discussion purposes, yes. Is there any more discussion of the motion? All right, Sherry, let's take a roll call on the motion to accept the staff recommendation on the SPL overlay.
Quillisi,
Yes.
Lottis,
Yes.
Nolan,
Yes.
Trent,
Yes.
Swift.
No.
Okay. I do think it would be a good idea to have staff talk with Ted Moore and see what options are available in the future for putting the 1450 Maricopa property in a configuration that would be acceptable to HC. So if you could do that, and since he already reached out to you with the suggestion of the SPL, I would think he would be quite receptive to a call.
And just so the commission knows, I will be reaching out to each of these individuals since they have reached out to staff, just to make them aware, whether they're listening in TV land or have actually been a part of the conversation this evening. I will be reaching out to each of these individuals.
Okay. One thing that we discussed at an earlier planning commission meeting, I don't know if it was 1, 2, or 3 meetings ago, was a suggestion that staff, when it has the time to do so, reach out to other parcel owners where the parcels are vacant or underutilized and ask about this. Of course, if we move ahead with this and HCD accepts it, then no action is required for the next 8 years. So I don't know where you want to go with that.
In response to that, it does not hurt to have sites in your back pocket that meet the criteria we were just talking about.
Probably be a good idea to look at Mr. Wyrick's suggestion then as well.
Right. That one will be looked at a little bit closer as well, independent, as well as some of these other vacant sites that I think Chair Quillisi was alluding to, maybe along Ojai Avenue and beyond.
Yeah,
So.
the east end along Ojai Avenue still has a lot of open property. Okay, well, let's move on to item 4, director decisions. Lucas, anything you want to comment on? If not, then we'll have the opportunity for commissioners to ask about the specific.
Nothing to comment. Several tree permits were issued. There was a DE that was approved. Fairly simple, but given that it is located within the VMU, the VMU has specific parameters that require DRP consideration. But given the simplicity of what was being talked about in terms of the enlargement of an existing window, seemed pretty straightforward for staff just to simply, or the director to simply approve the matter.
Seemed good to me.
Hey, Lucas, I noticed that there's a duplicate on this for Lily Walton. I just wanted to notice that the same thing's on there twice.
Is it for a tree?
Yeah.
308 Tico Road.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, you're right. It is a duplicate.
That's a typo. Sorry.
Typo in the table. That's fine.
Maybe they wanted twice the approval. I don't know.
Any other questions on the director's decisions? Great. Let's move on to item 5, future agenda items. Lucas?
Okay, so with the action that was just taken place by the commission, know that the preliminary housing element, it's being referred to as a preliminary housing element for June 16th, it really is going to be in a red line format. You can expect to see that coming before this commission very quickly for a review early on prior to it coming forward to the commission on June 16th. Well, just so the commission is aware, we're held to a pretty strict timeline here for the housing element for us to continue to meet this looming October 15th date. While it seems like it's a long ways out, there is a lot of work to be done by staff, by this commission, by city council, and by the consultant at this point to ensure that we stay within that deadline of October 15th for approval of the housing element. So thank you for doing the good work for the SPL overlay sites. Now we're going to incorporate those given the red lines that we have at this point, and you will be seeing a redlined version of the housing element very soon.
To June 16th?
That's for June 16th. In terms of July 7th, there is a concept review that we're working with the applicant on. I know I've said this time and time again, they are chewing the fat in terms of what we've provided them in terms of preliminary comments, and they're working through that. I mean, we're in weekly conversations with them in terms of where they're at with this process, and we expect that will be coming forward July 7th. There is the possibility of other items, but I did not put it on this list simply because there's some research that needs to be done. One of those items is the formula business ordinance that was already discussed by this commission that would be coming forward in the very near future. So I don't want to say that it would be July 7th, but certainly within that time frame, I think you can expect to see something with the research that's been done thus far.
And I apologize, I'd like to jump back to item 4 just for one moment, and that is the temporary use permit on the farmer's market. Could you explain what the parameters of that temporary use permit are?
So yes, that's a good question. So that's a part of the weekly farmers market. So initially at one point we were looking at having this considered by the commission. But in looking at it closer, the correct action at this point was to do a temporary use permit. Now, what's interesting about this is it's a weekly farmers market. And this temporary use permit has a sunset date of 6 months out. The farmers market itself is going to be starting tomorrow. Tomorrow is its kickoff, and it will be running on a weekly basis for the next 6 months.
An email from the Green Coalition saying so.
Yeah, I mean, there's other parties that are involved in this, but for the perspective of how we're looking at the temporary use permit, there were several conditions that were applied to this farmers market. One of which is a review at a specific point, basically 90 days out from expiration of this temporary use permit. At that point, we're going to go back to the table with the school district and see how this event has been running, and to see if this is truly a long-term event. If it is something that's long-term and not near-term, then we've got to look at a long-term solution versus the near-term solution as a temporary use permit would provide. Within the code itself, the temporary use permit doesn't necessarily have a hard end date. It's really through the conditions that govern how long that temporary use permit is really considered to be temporary.
And one of the things that has to be worked out, if it turns out to be a long-term thing, is that farmers market is not currently a permitted land use.
Yes, that is the elephant in the room. It is not a permitted use. However, we do have the city farmers market, which was and has been in operation since 1991, not necessarily at its current location, but is in the same zoning district. So it's non-conforming, but still operates under the existing conditional use.
Non-conforming, right.
Those are the challenges. So.
All right. Thank you for that. Unless there's more questions about future agenda items, we'll go on to the last item 6. Is there anything that any commissioner wishes to report at this point? Items of interest or within the commission's purview? Okay.
Steve, I apologize, Steve. I don't recall, and this is perhaps a mistake on my part, I don't recall that the minutes of the last meeting were approved.
Oh.
Is that? Whoa. I'm sorry. Item 1, minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, May 19th.
Yeah, they were approved.
Yeah,
they
I
were.
thought we were okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
There was no comment on them, which typically there is.
I see. I apologize. I've got my list here and I didn't check it off. I apologize, Steve. Yeah.
We had our eye on the prize on some bigger items.
Yeah.
To say that the minutes aren't big.
Yeah.
There used to be an item 7 that was our city council liaison
Right.
decided to comment. I haven't seen it for a while, but I haven't seen a city council member for a while. Does anyone know, has that tradition just been abandoned by city council?
No, it is not abandoned. I'll respond to that immediately. That is an error on our part. That should be included. And if the council member is still in the room, this would be their opportunity to speak. But commission, and it could even be under commission member report, whereby I've got a couple comments as well that I'd like to share with the commission.
I'd like to hear those.
Okay. So I know several months ago and on an ongoing kind of irregular basis, the commission had been asking when City Hall would potentially be opened. And for many months, I didn't have an answer to this commission. But I can tell you now there is an answer. That City Hall will be opened as of June 15th, in line with the state reopening and rescinding a lot of those emergency ordinances or orders that took place over a year ago now. So just know that City Hall is opening its doors again with some restrictions in terms of face masks being worn, social distancing. Just know that those things are in place, and we're putting parameters in place in City Hall to continue to ensure safety protocols. The other piece is, I know the commission had asked several times when we would be going live again and in person. And that is in the very near future. And I think you could expect as early as June 16th, our very next meeting, for that to take place.
Meaning that we all show up in the city council chambers to have the meeting?
If you so choose.
The governor's order on the Brown Act has not changed and will not change after June 15th. So council members of the commission can still appear remotely and are not required to open their place from where they're appearing remotely to the public. But the commission can meet in person. It's my understanding the commission will be meeting in person going forward. Is that right, Lucas?
Yes, but you will have an option. So if you want to continue to log in, the nice thing that, I don't know if I say it's a nice thing, but the interesting thing that has come out of this pandemic situation is there wasn't a whole lot of reliance on technology. It was difficult a lot of times to have someone Zoom in per se. I don't know the other term that we could use, but to video in for a specific meeting. That technology has been put to the front, and now we have that technology at hand and at our disposal. You're seeing that very directly here with commission meetings and council meetings being held live, not necessarily in person, but live and being recorded and being provided all of the necessary state requirements and Brown Act requirements as well. So just know that moving forward as early as June 16th, there will be an opportunity for commissioners who choose to be meeting live and in person.
I know the local sanitary district board that I serve on has for a couple of months now had Zoom meetings, but also had some of the directors in the headquarters building with staff. And so one of the pictures in the Zoom meeting was a wide angle view of the boardroom with some of the commissioners and the staff in it, and then additional directors still coming in remotely. And my understanding, Nikhil, is that is going to be legal for the foreseeable future.
Correct.
Okay.
I would call this a transition period, if you
yes.
will. And that's that's really kind of a comfort level to a certain degree.
It's certainly been convenient for me because I've had to be in Texas and I'm now in Colorado. And I appreciate being able to participate in the meetings in spite of the distance. So,
Right.
anything else from any commissioner who wishes to bring up another item? If not, then I thank you all very much. And at 8:50, I think it is, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much for your dedication